Iraq remains on the verge of splintering into three separate states as Sunni militants continue to maintain their stronghold in the north and west of Iraq. On Tuesday, Iraqi security forces were forced to abandon an effort to retake the city of Tikrit, the hometown of former Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein. Fighters aligned with the Sunni insurgent group ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, seized Tikrit last month. Meanwhile, in Baghdad, at least 27 people died Tuesday in a series of attacks, including 2 car bombs. ISIS declared itself a caliphate last month and now controls large parts of northern and western Iraq and much of eastern Syria.
On the political front, Iraqi politicians are scrambling to form a power-sharing government in an effort to save Iraq from splintering into separate Shiite, Sunni and Kurdish states. In the first step, Iraqi politicians named the moderate Sunni Islamist Salim al-Jabouri to be Iraq's new Speaker of the Parliament. To talk more about Iraq, we are going directly to Baghdad to speak to Hannah Alam, foreign affairs correspondent for McClatchy newspapers. She's been reporting from Iraq for the last 2 weeks. She served as the Baghdad bureau chief for Knight Ridder newspapers from 2003 to 2005. Hannah, welcome to Democracy Now! Can you talk about the latest that's happening in Baghdad right now, as well as the choosing of the parliament leader?
Sure. Hi. Well, for a country on the verge of collapse, the capital feels deceptively calm. People are going out. They're going about their business. The restaurants are packed at night. Families are out. You can't even find a space at the parking mall. That's not to say people aren't terrified. They are. They're not immune to the violence that we already are hearing about. Assassinations, car bombings, a massacre just the other day in a compound of several women. So, Iraqis are aware of these things. Baghdadi residents hear these things, but unfortunately, they've become so, I guess, acceptant or resigned to such a level of violence that it hasn't yet spiraled into the kind of bloodshed that would keep most Iraqis indoors. Unfortunately, they don't doubt that that moment will come, and they see it as a slow escalation that could explode at any moment. So there's this really this sense of unpredictability, and people are terrified. Then you have this parallel reality, sort of the political process where the parliament's been delayed 2 or 3 times now before meeting yesterday to decide on a speaker. And, Iraqis throw their hands up and say, yeah, sure, what's the rush when you've got the country on the verge of collapse? And we've got the Kurds in the north moving toward greater independence. We have, the Sunni militants of the Islamic State having seized up to half of the country, and people are really concerned about this sort of glacial pace of government formation. Yesterday was a sign that there was some movement towards easing the political deadlock, but there's still a long way to go, especially about the future of Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki.
Can you talk about who Jabouri is?
Salim al-Jabouri, he's the youngest Speaker of Parliament ever named in Iraq. He is a moderate Sunni Islamist, and his nomination was delayed for a while because there was some brokering behind the scenes, and the supporters, the state of law bloc of Prime Minister Maliki, they wanted to trade their support for Jabouri's nomination for the Sunni bloc's, acceptance or backing of a third 4-year term for the prime minister. He was named in the end yesterday. Overwhelmingly, Parliament voted in favor of his post as speaker, but that doesn't mean that that there's yet a broader political deal that will form the kind of power-sharing government that the United States and most Iraqis would like to see to get the country out of this crisis.
Hannah Alam, after the Islamic State took over such large parts of Iraq, the Maliki government made a call for volunteers to help the Iraqi military, since much of the Iraqi military abandoned their posts. Could you talk about some of the people who are volunteering, the Shiite militias who are patrolling Baghdad, who these people are, how many volunteers there are, and what the impacts of the ISIS takeover have been, and how close they are to Baghdad, in fact?
Sure, sure. Well, at some of their positions, they're only a few miles from the capital. That doesn't mean that they would have an easy way in. They're certainly protecting Baghdad is the government's priority. They know the implications of what it would mean to have a concerted ISIS attack on the capital. But there's also, again, this element of unpredictability. Will the Iraqi forces that are now backed by all these tens of thousands of volunteers, will they be able to defend the capital? So far, they haven't made really any military gains in the north to recapture some of the territory that ISIS seized. At best, they're only fending off further encroachment. So there's that. Down in Najaf, even more important than the Prime Minister's call to arms was the fatwa issued by the Shia highest authority in Iraq, Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani. He issued a call to arms that asked all Iraqis to come and help in the defense of the nation. And he and his office and officials around him have stressed several times that that was not a sectarian call to arms, that it was a patriotic national duty, but that's not how it's been interpreted on the ground, and it's not how it's playing out on the ground. It has given religious cover to the remobilization of militias that the government spent, and the U.S. military, when it was here, spent the past several years trying to disband. So we're talking about groups like Muqtada Sadr's Mahdi Army militia, Asaib Ahl al-Haq, which was a splinter group of the Mahdi Army trained by Iran, close ties to Iran, and several other Iranian-backed Shia Muslim militias. And then on top of that, you've got tribes that are offering up tens of thousands of their members, and you've got these just ordinary teenagers, and young men who are answering the call on religious grounds. So it's this hodgepodge of forces. They really sort of lack a central command. So far, they've said that they would all play fair and answer to the government and work within the government structure. But that's just simply not the case. There are just too many people with arms roaming around with disparate leaders.
Well, last month, Democracy Now! Interviewed former UN Special Envoy for Syria, Ambassador Lakhdar Brahimi. He was previously the UN Special Representative for Iraq. He suggested that sectarianism in Iraq was fostered in the early years of the U.S. invasion and occupation.
The impression one had was that the people that were preferred by the occupying powers were the most sectarian Shia and the most pro-Iranian Shia. So, that Iraq is now very, very close to Iran. Again, from the point of view of somebody who looks at things from outside, I have absolutely no knowledge of what went on in the high spheres of power in Washington. The impression we had is that these people were put in charge either out of total ignorance, and that is extremely difficult to accept, or intentionally. But the fact is, the system that was established was very sectarian.
Hana Alam, that was Lakhdar Brahimi, the former UN Special Envoy for Syria. He was previously the Special Representative, the UN Special Representative for Iraq. Could you comment on what he said, and also on reports of the Islamic State's violence and the atrocities, really, against Sunni Muslims, in addition to Shia and Kurds?
Sure. I think it's important to note that the Islamic State is not doing this land grab, this insurgency alone. It has a lot of support, really crucial support, especially for holding territories that it seized, from, again, this mixture of former Baathists, ex-military and intelligence from the old regime, some tribes. And the reason they've been able to cultivate some support among those communities, well, some are just, against the whole political system that was established under the U.S. occupation. Some haven't come to terms with the loss of their former power and prestige. But then there are a wide swath of Sunni communities who are simply fed up with the sectarian policies they've seen under this administration of Nouri al-Maliki. And I think we should point out, he first ran on a platform that was considered nationalist. He went after Shia militias in the south, and people thought, okay, maybe this isn't going to be as sectarian as we feared. Unfortunately, as most analysts or observers of Iraq could tell you, that has changed, and he's pursued an increasingly authoritarian and sectarian agenda that has led to what we have now, which is the simultaneous Sunni uprising that preceded the ISIS offensive of last month, and then on top of that, you've got the ISIS offensive that's created these strange bedfellows that, when they've worked together in the past, it hasn't lasted very long because their ideologies and goals are so different. For now, they are working in tandem in some of these areas, but we're already seeing signs of the fraying of that fragile alliance, because ISIS has already targeted and executed former Baathists and a whole village of tribe, the Jabouri tribe, that where they only suspected that they were forming a rival force. So we are seeing now incidents of some Sunni pushback against ISIS, but I think it's also important to remember that that does not equate support for the government of Nouri al-Maliki. They still have their set of grievances. They'd still like to see this sectarian political system abolished. And for now, the ISIS is turning out to be the means to that goal in their eyes.
And we're going to continue to talk about this after break. Hannah Alam is foreign affairs correspondent from a Kalachi newspaper. She's been reporting from Iraq for the last 2 weeks, but has been there for years covering Iraq. Her most recent piece talks about how Baghdad residents are trying to maintain a semblance of normal life as the conflict approaches Baghdad. We will also be joined by Patrick Coburn, the Middle East correspondent for The Independent, just back from Iraq. This is Democracy Now!, back in a minute.